The radical left's agendas are attacking your values, but conservatives like you haven't forgotten what this country was built on. My friends, the Heritage Foundation exists to make sure your voice is heard and to represent your values in the D.C. swamp. The Heritage Foundation stands for your values, and they won't give up the struggle because they know you never will. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Fallon has no talent. Kimmel has no talent. They're next. They're going to be going. I hear they're going to be going. I don't know, but I would imagine because they get, Colbert has better ratings than Kimmel or Fallon. You know that.
So that turned out to be somewhat predictive. Which, what does that mean for the other name on that list? That was the president about 5 weeks ago. As we take a look at Jimmy Kimmel in the misinformation age, as we've had another very festive and busy news day. Hey there, I'm Brian Mudd in for the great one, Mark Levin. Mark is in Israel. He'll be back in the not so distant with all kinds of great stories and info for you. Meanwhile, you can follow on social media. He's had a lot that's been coming out of that trip. Now, I am always honored to be here with you. I am the host of the Brian Mudd Show, my home station WJNO in West Palm Beach, and you can catch the Brian Mudd Show, the podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And you can also follow me at Brian Mudd Radio. Now, speaking of social, so this just in. My social media feeds, the various algorithms, what do they feed you? What do you usually see when you go on social media? What populates? How much Kimmel you get? I never get Jimmy Kimmel content. Never in my feed. Mr. Producer, how much Kimmel you have running in your feed? You probably do have a lot of Kimmel in your feed. Yeah, so, and that's because, when it comes to Kimmel, when it comes to Colbert or whomever, I mean, any of those no talent ass clowns, I truly couldn't care less about whatever it is that they've said. And to be clear, that's not like one of those qualifiers. You'll have some people say, I really couldn't care less. And they're really just kind of compensating for the fact that they actually do care. No, I don't care. And they don't bug me because it's not a second thought in my life or my day at any point ever. And so their shows, their opinions, whatever, because you have no shortage of mental midgets. You got no shortage of bigots with opinions. They're out there everywhere. Right? They just happen to be among the group of those people. And yes, in broadcast TV. But the fact of the matter is that despite declining ratings, millions, most of them on social media, millions of people actually do. And for that reason, what they say and what Kimmel specifically said that led to his suspension, you've heard the clip many times over by now, I'm sure, that we hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. It's like, what in the world? And the guy has all those writers, too. It's special. But anyway, that kind of stuff does matter. It mattered to over 1 million people who, for some reason, forgot how to use a remote and watched it. It mattered to many millions who watched it online, which is where most of his audience is. And probably, and you hear this a lot, and you heard this with Colbert, too. They're losing all this money for the networks, but it's the online audience. Okay. All right, they never tell you about the monetization of that for them specifically, but look at the online audience. But anyway, the reason the online audience is far superior to the people actually tune into those shows, probably because even the people are like, yeah, I'll do the Kimmel. You probably don't want to be exposed to more than like 60 seconds of clip. So anyway, it also mattered what he said to the yahoos in that room who laughed right along with him. You know, that was one of the things that was actually creepiest in the whole sequence with Kimmel. It was not just that he said that, and then that he immediately transitioned to playing a clip of President Trump talking about the construction of the ballroom at the White House. It was, they had all the people there thought that was funny too. I mean, you're literally talking about this horrific assassination, and within a matter of 20 seconds, you transition into something that you think is a really humorous subject. Just how you even can twist things that way really speaks to the character. But again, it wasn't just him. All the yahoos in that room that laughed right along with him. So that kind of stuff matters to these people. But the even bigger issue with Kimmel's comments were that, of course, he was demonstrably lying. This is the crux of the issue here. Not that he is a tasteless scumbag. Not that he is a no-talent ass clown. It's that he was demonstrably lying. And he's far from the first. While as part of regular practice, I mentioned I could not care less about the Kimmel thing or the Colbert thing or insert idiot here. I do regularly monitor what's happening with your godless, soulless, and slanderous left. I sample a heavy dose of it daily to see what the heck it is that they're doing, what it is they have going on, the kind of vile hatred that they're spewing towards our president and his supporters, what they think about you. For example, of particular interest to me, I keep tabs on what's happening with Randy Weingarten, the president of the National Education Association. I like keeping tabs on what the agenda is of the largest teachers union, because that kind of gives you an idea of what the agenda is that's being filtered into the teachers themselves, that's being filtered into our kids' classrooms. So knowing what Randy Weingarten is up to gives you an idea of what the teachers unions are doing in the classrooms. So anyway, as early as last week, in the immediate aftermath of the assassin being apprehended, I saw messages like this, which was reposted by Randy Weingarten. And by the way, as of this minute, is still active in her X feed. If you go to Randy Weingarten, you go back to last Friday, in her X feed, you will see this. According to Utah officials, plus police interviews with his family, Tyler Robinson hated Charlie Kirk because Kirk wasn't conservative enough. GOPers now scrubbing X posts about Dems faster than DOJ erases Trump name in Epstein files. Again, that was put up, reposted by Randy Weingarten, still active right now. Obviously a straight up lie. And so here's the thing. Let's say that, for example, I don't know, you're a teacher who pays attention to Randy Weingarten. Okay, so now that finds your algorithm. That does find your feed. And now let's say that you sample a steady dose of leftist nonsense while you're online. You're going to find no shortage of influencers or faux news sources or whatever. In some cases, AI animations that reinforce the fake news. And then you get to Monday, and Jimmy Kimmel's drivel comes along. And if you had any doubt about whether what you were reading on social media was true, well, that doubt might be removed when Kimmel talks about it on a traditional broadcast network. And who knows, maybe at that point, you disturbingly laugh right along with his bit too. That's how the misinformation age works. Algorithms online create positive feedback loops so that most people only see what it is that they prefer to say. For example, and guilty as charged here. Well, Mr. Producer does have a lot of Kimmel in his feed because he's working on all that stuff today. I just happened to pop into my feed. First thing that came up was Charlie Kirk, one of his debates. Right? You go to yours, you'll probably see something similar too. That's how they work. Left and right doesn't matter. It's a positive feedback loop for you seeing what it is that you would prefer to see based upon what you're always going to. So there usually, these days, for example, isn't a day that goes by anymore when I don't have a listener that isn't asking me, sending me something online, about an AI fake. Some cases, hey, is this real? Other cases, just thinking it's real. And a lot of the fakes are already very convincing in the first place. And then when you have all the misinformation from the human types. So let's put some context to this. It was just in June that Oxford's Rutgers Institute for the Study of Journalism found that for the first time, a majority of Americans, 54%, get their news from social media and video networks. 54% now. By the way, you are part of the 28% who get your news from podcast and radio. So what the study also found was that already 7% of what people consumed as news entirely generated of AI. I mean, what the heck could go wrong there, right? So there are large swaths of society that are effectively just devoid of reality. And they might even think they're informed. They might be seeking out information every day and could be just totally devoid of reality. And it's quite likely that many of them do get Kimmel in their feed. So to bring this back around to Kimmel getting suspended, potentially canned, we'll see where this goes. FCC Chair Brendan Carr has emphasized the importance of licensed broadcasters serving the public interest. The legal requirement to maintain a license. Okay, well, in today's misinformation age, probably even more important than it had previously been. For example, what if those who'd been fed fake news all weekend heard Kimmel share, I don't know, different news and views? How about actual truth in that little bit that he did? I'll pick up there next. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
Decades of conflict in the Middle East made many despair of ever finding a lasting peace. But in 2020, Israel and 4 Arab nations, once estranged, joined together for peace by signing the Abraham Accords. Thanks to President Trump's leadership, these historic agreements opened up previously unimaginable channels for cooperation, new pathways for peace, trade, investment, and collaboration. After 5 years, the Abraham Accords still stand as a beacon of hope for a future of shared growth and interfaith tolerance. Why should Americans like you care? Peace in the Middle East is vital to America's national security, and that's why the Heritage Foundation dedicated its resources to supporting the implementation and expansion of the Abraham Accords and Peace Through Strength. And that's why the Heritage Foundation's experts released the Abraham Accords report, tracking the evolution and expansion of the Abraham Accords. This exclusive resource, only available from the Heritage Foundation, presents the latest news and statistics on how the Accords are boosting trade and innovation and advancing the U.S. critical interests in the Middle East. Get the latest updates today by going to heritage.org/LEVIN. That's heritage.org/Levin. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
But even though we're talking about comedy, this is so serious, Aaron. Yeah. America is a less free place if late night comedians cannot do and say what they want. Of course, they can be tuned out. People can change the channel. That's how we vote. That's how we have our say in America. But this really does have a chilling effect across the American media.
Tell you what has a chilling effect is Brian Stelter. That man knows how to have a chilling effect on a situation. Okay, so Jimmy Kimmel in the misinformation age. I left off talking about the algorithms, the fake news world that so many people live in. And this can happen on both sides of the aisle. You are going to get in your social media, you're going to get online what it is that you like, that you tend to go to. And if all you do is go to fake news, all you're going to see is fake news. And then if you happen to get that reinforced by somebody like, oh, I don't know, Jimmy Kimmel, then all of a sudden it can become your reality. So the whole idea that Stelter is not addressing there is the difference with a licensed broadcaster serving the public interest, let alone the fact that you have private companies that are involved in this entire situation. So I threw out the question. Let's say that people had been fed fake news all weekend, so much that had been fed online, suggesting that the assassin was some right-wing nut job. What if Kimmel had actually shared something that was accurate and true? Well, you know what? That actually could have served the public interest. That could have served the public. And maybe it would have even opened the eyes of those brainwashed by the internet trolls, brainwashed by the AI fakes, brainwashed by Randy Stinkin' Weingarten, the head of the National Education Association, who still on her feed right now has demonstrably false, slanderous, outrageous information saying that according to Utah officials, plus police interviews with his family, Tyler Robinson hated Charlie Kirk because Kirk wasn't conservative enough. GOPers now scrubbing ex-post about Dems faster than DOJ erases Trump name in Epstein files. That's still on Randy Weingarten's feed right now. But hey, she should be the most influential person over the teachers in the country, right? But anyway, now instead Kimmel opted to demonstrably lie. Did it to you, hoping to, I don't know, reinforce the fake news views, I guess. I imagine the guy is actually smart enough to know the difference. Not to mention, I mean, with however many dozens of people ridiculously work on that show with him, surely somebody in the mix knew the truth. I'm sure Jimmy Kimmel knew the truth. Just chose to directly lie to you. So, importantly, from my perspective, the action to suspend Kimmel, it wasn't by the FCC directly, but rather by private companies, by Nexstar Media, Sinclair Broadcast Group, large owners of the ABC affiliates across the country, and then, yes, subsequently by Disney, parent of ABC. We'll pick up there next. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin.
After Hamas's October 7, 2023 terror attack on Israel, the Abraham Accords seemed doomed to fall apart. But now, 2 years after the terrorist attack and 5 years after the historic peace agreements were signed, the Abraham Accords remain resilient. However, without the support of the American people, the Accords have an uncertain future. So to keep the Abraham Accords alive for the next 5 years, it's critical that patriots like you support them. And that starts with understanding exactly how they came about and why they're so important. At heritage.org/Levin, Heritage heritage.org/LEVIN. You'll find an exclusive resource only available from the Heritage Foundation. The Abraham Accords report gives you the latest news and statistics on how the Accords are boosting trade and innovation and advancing the United States' vital interests in the Middle East. The Accords will only continue to bring peace to the Middle East with your support, so go to heritage.org/Levin to claim your free resource today. That's heritage.org/LEVIN, paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
Mark Levin speaking to the 4 out of 5 Americans who are literate at 877-381-3811.
This is an assault on everything this country has stood for since the Constitution's been signed. One of the great hallmarks of our country is free speech, whether you agree or disagree. And this administration is trying to snuff it out. They don't want people to even speak.
This guy, Chuck Schumer. Oh, man. You know what? He sounded like he had a little life to him today. He did have that going for him. You know, the one big miss in the Senate when you're doing stuff like this, they were unveiling, I believe it's called the NOPE Act, the No Political Enemies Act. So it's free speech, free speech, free speech from the people, the party that literally targeted your speech online, that literally silenced conservatives online, that threatened big tech companies and social media companies to make sure that things like, I don't know, Hunter Biden's laptop were spiked, among all kinds of these people. You can't make it up. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. They don't want you to speak. There is something about regulated broadcasting. So a couple things for you real quick. Mark is in Israel, going to be back soon. And if you don't have a copy of On Power yet, you're missing out. In fact, I don't just have one. I got two. Got paperback and hard copy. So you get one, get two, get informed is the most important thing. I think it is a great compliment to so many of Mark's works, goes hand in glove with American Marxism. Now, so we're talking about Jimmy Kimmel and the misinformation age and the posturing now of Schumer and the political left, that now suddenly they're for freedom of expression after having used the federal government to target you, to limit your ability to speak, to share, to disseminate information. A couple things that I brought up about serving the public interest, which is the mandate when you get into the broadcast world. And I mentioned that for me, from my perspective, it's important that the FCC wasn't directly the one making this decision, but rather Nexstar Media, Sinclair Broadcasting, and then ultimately Disney. Now, the cynical will say that Nexstar's pending $6.2 billion merger with another media entity that requires FCC approval to go through, behind them, making the first big move. So earlier in the day yesterday, you did have FCC Chair Carr. He told Benny Johnson that these companies can find ways to take action on Kimmel, or there is going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. Now, you could see how that could be interpreted as a threat. And one of the things I'm very cautious of, heavy-handed government agencies, is those on the right of seeing from the IRS targeting of over a decade ago, to the big tech pressure to censor conservative content that we're talking about, and real news, to the targeting of the finances by pressuring big banks, of a bunch of different conservative. By the way, 92 conservative groups. That's what the Trump administration has uncovered. 92 conservative groups were targeted by the Biden DOJ, their finances with big banks. Oh, by the way, including Turning Point USA. So the left has been more than willing to weaponize government agencies. We've seen this for a very long time. And should they come back into power again? I mean, history says that at some point it's going to happen. I say should, because I want to be an optimist here. Maybe people will find God in all of this and get away from the Marxists. But anyway, should they come back into power again? I do have concerns about the weaponization of the FCC. So I don't know if the decision to pull Kimmel for now was altruistic. I don't know if it was pragmatic. But I do know that Jimmy Kimmel was not serving the public interest. And this may have also been the perfect opportunity and excuse just for ABC to do something they needed to do. You take a look at his ratings or the lack thereof. So as always, you do have two sides of stories. You got one side of facts. And, facts matter more in the misinformation age than they really ever have before. Let's go to Jim in Dallas. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, good evening, and thank you for the privilege. But it was a corporate decision. It was the same with the professors that got fired. You want to voice your opinion, great, but you just don't broadcast it like they had, because what it does, unless the institutions, the companies, did discipline in such a way, it's like they're endorsing it, that they agree with it. And they can't have that stigma on them as a corporation or as an institution. It gets down to business. Look what they did to the marketing crew with Dylan Mulvaney and Bud Light. And it still hadn't recovered. It was just, they took such a horrific event and they twisted it in a way that, not even twisted it, but they just made it such deplorable issues out of it that, the corporates and the institutions, the educational institutions, they couldn't back it because, again, it would have been a reflection on them as endorsing it.
Jim, you're spot on there. I think you make a really good point, because at the point where a horrific assassination of somebody is an opportunity to misinform for political game, and is funny. Somehow or another, you can twist into humor. So you can misinform and try to turn it into humor. Again, there's something so broken in that situation that as a corporation, how can you stand behind it? And I do think, in the grand scheme of fake news, of dishonesty that's out there, even on the broadcast networks. I mean, you take a look at, the news product at ABC News. You take a look at the news product at NBC News, at CBS News. I mean, a lot of fake news going on there, right? But you are really talking about a whole new level of depravity at the point where you have a horrific assassination and you use that as an opportunity to deliberately lie, effectively slander, and then try to manipulate that into humor. That is disgusting in every imaginable way. But then to do that on broadcast television, where there is a license and there is a mandate to serve the public interest, that's a whole different thing. Now, again, there is a lot of evidence that Brandon Carr, who is supportive of this, may have had some influence in this. I do think that there needs to be a very thoughtful approach from this point forward with the FCC, because the weaponization of that organization, I'm in my 28th year in this industry. I can't tell you how many times that people have come after me, have come after my stations, that kind of thing. Lord knows Mark has dealt with it. Good gosh. And so can you imagine what might happen to this industry if the left gets a hold of it and tries to, handle things from a weaponized perspective? This has long been a concern of ours on the broadcast talk radio side. So, that's where there needs to be some thoughtfulness that comes into play. I respect Carr to a great degree, little nervous with the approach there. And the point about the company stepping up and doing the right thing by ultimately their viewers, but also their shareholders, and also just humanity. That's a very important thing. So then you get into the next part of this. Which is, the idea of cancel culture, hypocrisy. And even before we had the Kimmel thing, you had a lot of people that were getting suspended, were getting fired over the weekend. And, you're doxing people and you're rooting for them to get fired. Well, so talk about that for a minute. So the definition of doxing is this. It's the act of exposing private or identifying information on the internet about an individual or group without the person or group's consent, usually with malicious intent. Okay, so that is doxing. So, for example, identifying the name of an ICE officer and maybe even their home address while they're just lawfully doing their job. That is doxing. Now, drawing attention to, or maybe even creating a database of people who have posted stuff online, that is not. So in the wake of the remarkable state of our country, in which, tens of thousands of people at a minimum have been documented posting material online celebrating in some way the assassination of Charlie Kirk, this just in, if you post stuff publicly online, you can't, by definition, be doxed. You've exposed yourself. You doxed yourself. So, for example, in the immediate aftermath of the assassination, he had a website. It was charliesmurderers.com that was established. And it encouraged people to upload postings of those celebrating Kirk's death for the purpose of exposing these evidently deeply disturbed people. And the backers of the site also made it clear that they intended to establish the largest firing operation in history. And so by Monday, you had nearly 64,000 submissions that had been uploaded before the site was taken down. And the backers then rebranded it as the Charlie Kirk Data Foundation. Most recently have been soliciting for email submissions, suggesting that they'll be back up with a new website with vetted submissions. I don't know. We'll see what comes to that thing. There's no telling how many people could potentially lose work over that operation or whatever's going to come of it. And a lot had been made of it. But here's the thing. I certainly don't endorse cancel culture at all. I also don't endorse the idea of intentionally attempting to get people fired for posting stupid social media things. But at the same time, I do endorse personal accountability. Big believer in personal accountability. So if people posted these things, it's their choice and their decision. If someone decides to try to focus additional attention on what you already put out there for public consumption, that's on you. That's on you. If your employer fires you, that's also on you. It's not doxing. Just as many on the left immediately jump to the both sides are to blame after Kirk's assassination. The left and their allies in the GSS news media, they're now trying to corrupt the accountability side of this conversation as well. They're trying to do it with Kimmel. They're trying to do it with people that have been suspended and fired for celebrating the assassination. They're trying to suggest that conservatives who speak out against cancel culture are hypocrites for potentially maybe even aiding job loss of those that are cheering on the assassination. But they're also actively trying to redefine what doxing is as a cover for their objectives. So it's a tactic, and all this really is straight out of Rules for Radicals. Never let a good crisis go to waste. But there is one very clear thing here, and that is that anyone who would publicly cheer the assassination of someone simply for speaking and believing what they believed in, at best is a deeply broken and troubled individual in need of intervention. And so at that point, you start thinking about Kimmel how deeply broken and troubled of an individual is he, who deliberately lies, who deliberately misleads, and then turns the thing into humor and wants to bring how many people along with him he can on that thing. That is a pretty disgusting place to be. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
Decades of conflict in the Middle East made many despair of ever finding a lasting peace. But in 2020, Israel and 4 Arab nations, once estranged, joined together for peace by signing the Abraham Accords. Thanks to President Trump's leadership, these historic agreements opened up previously unimaginable channels for cooperation, new pathways for peace, trade, investment, and collaboration. After 5 years, the Abraham Accords still stand as a beacon of hope for a future of shared growth and interfaith tolerance. Why should Americans like you care? Peace in the Middle East is vital to America's national security, and that's why the Heritage Foundation dedicated its resources to supporting the implementation and expansion of the Abraham Accords and Peace Through Strength. And that's why the Heritage Foundation's experts released the Abraham Accords Report, tracking the evolution and expansion of the Abraham Accords. This exclusive resource, only available from the Heritage Foundation, presents the latest news and statistics on how the Accords are boosting trade and innovation and advancing the U.S. critical interests in the Middle East. Get the latest updates today by going to heritage.org/LEVIN. That's heritage.org/Levin. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
I mean, he's just amazing. Fired for lack of talent. That was the president in Mariel, England today. So very successful trip over there with trade deals and the like. Was talking about how disappointed he has been with Putin and how he thought that getting peace between Russia and Ukraine would be a lot easier than it's been. So you got all that going on. No end in that in sight. Talking about the hostages in Israel quite a bit today. Saying that it is critical to get them out, standing against England and others who want to recognize a Palestinian state. Oh my gosh, there can never be a two-state solution there. President talking about how their intelligence says that Hamas wants to put the hostages out there in front of their fighters to have them sacrificed that way. But yeah, we should recognize those people as a state, right? Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. We've been talking about Jimmy Kimmel in the misinformation age. And I was talking about personal accountability most recently. Whether we're talking about people who went online and cheered the assassination, celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk, or whether we're talking about Jimmy Kimmel, who demonstrably lied about it and then tried to turn it into some kind of punchline. Personal accountability comes into this stuff. And I want you to just kind of look at it this way. As you had private companies that made the decision on Kimmel, it's understandable. It's understandable if you have people that are very disturbing in their behavior. If you have employers that opt for prevention, because after all, think about this. Do you want the person who publicly cheers Charlie Kirk's assassination, do you want them working next to you? How you going to feel at work? You see these people, they're posting things like, yeah, isn't this great, huh? And then they're your coworker that works right next to you. You probably don't want them educating your kids. You probably don't want them, flying your family or protecting your president either. And so that's not cancel culture run amok. It's just simply a matter of common sense. And so what happened to Kimmel was simply a matter of common sense. We'll see if that still ends up prevailing because, it could always end up coming back here too. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin.
This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
If we're true to Charlie's memory, the number one thing that people will remember about Charlie Kirk is that he was a great advocate for the Christian faith.
Your vice president, and no doubt about that. No doubt about that. Brian Mudd in for the great one, Mark Levin, who is in Israel and will be back very soon. And in the meantime, always a pleasure to be with you. Host the Brian Mudd Show, my home station, WJNO in West Palm Beach. And you can catch me at Brian Mudd Radio socially. You can catch the Brian Mudd Show, my podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Would love for you to check it out. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. And for a lot of us, it's been a heck of a week plus, right? It's been a really emotional week plus. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about a spiritual journey in an assassination culture. I was thinking a lot early this week, really over the weekend, but tell you about something that happened here. You might think I'm crazy for a minute or two, kind of getting into it. The time flies. It's been over a week since the assassination of Charlie. It also happens to mark 3 days since my best friend, not named Ashley, my wonderful and talented wife, passed away. And I've had a little time to reflect on both. And, you know, the irony in life is that the more you know, the more you realize how little you actually know. And for me, a realization in recent years has been that, you know, for someone who's, in theory, well-informed, I would like to think reasonably intelligent, not great one territory, but, you know, I do okay. I've been woefully ignorant regarding life's most important task and the most important part of the journey, which have been my faith. I think about how much time I spend every day researching stuff, working on stories, everything that goes into, you know, my whole two sides of stories, one side of facts, all that stuff every single day. And then how little time I ever allocated for my faith. I mean, it's like, oh, okay. So this is something I've been actively working on with the aforementioned wonderful and talented wife. Best wife ever, by the way. And some are going to think I'm silly for saying such a thing. But I mentioned my best friend, not named Ashley, passing away. It happened to be my Maine Coon, Piper. And he was truly a gift from God who left this world too soon. He died of cancer. Woke up to this on Monday morning. And my wife and I found out that we weren't able to have our own children the hard way. And so one day, out of the blue, I received an entirely unexpected call. It was a coworker that I had barely known. I think she had worked here for like 3 weeks. I talked to her a couple of times. Nice, very nice. But didn't even really know her. Just moved to the area. And she calls me out of the blue and said that she had just picked up a kitten. And I was going to think she was crazy, but she just knew that it was meant for me. Now, as she went on to tell me, she was driving home along a busy road, happened to be in Boca Raton, South Florida, very busy area. And she saw what appeared to be a small animal that was thrown onto the side of the road from the vehicle in front of her, and she was horrified. So she pulled over to retrieve it, and turned out to be a nearly newborn kitten. And as the owner of 2 large dogs, she knew immediately she was not going to be able to hang on to that kitten. She wasn't, but she said right then it just hit her, and she had to call me because I was supposed to have this little kitten. At the time, we had a 10-year-old tabby, and we hadn't thought at all about like taking on a new pet or anything, new kitten. But it was the weirdest thing. As soon as she said, "Hey, this thing's meant for you," I knew it too. And my wife happened to be in Fort Lauderdale, which geographically is south of Boca, and we live close to West Palm, which is north of there. So it's a bit of a hike for me to get down to Boca to go get this kitten, but it was on her way, more or less, coming back from work that day. So at first I told her she had to go pick up an important package. Thinking that if I told my wife just out of the blue, sight unseen, "Hey, there's this kitten you got to go pick up," she's going to be like, no. But she didn't bite, so I had to tell her what she was going to pick up. But when I did, she went ahead. She went for it. And she brought that little guy home, and we bonded at first sight. And shortly thereafter, we learned that our kitten was a Maine Coon, probably no more than a couple weeks old when we got him. And we wanted him to have a friend, so we sought out a Maine Coon rescue. And there are not a lot of Maine Coons in South Florida, by the way, especially, legit rescue places. So we had to drive a few hours to find our baby girl, Button. And a sweet little thing. She was even covered in fleas when we rescued her, but it didn't matter. She immediately climbed onto my wife's chest and wanted to stay there for nearly the 3-hour trip back home. So anyway, these 2 little kittens filled a void that had kind of been in place since, the idea of kids wasn't a reality. And we became convinced. So we didn't end up with both of them by chance. And I told you, you're probably going to think I'm crazy here for a minute. And about now, you're at that point going, why the heck are you telling me about your cats? I mean, well, come on, man. It's because they taught me to believe in something I didn't before. Very skeptical, probably cynical in many cases. They taught me to believe in and pay attention to signs. And having lost Piper, the sweetest little creature I've ever known, and I say that as an animal lover, I am that guy when it comes to animals. I love nature, I love animals, so I'm easy to win over. But this guy, sweetest little thing I've ever known. It's just something that had been on my mind, especially in the context of Charlie Kirk and what he stood for. And so it's important in life that we look for signs when God is trying to work in our lives. What I shared with you came to mind because this was just over a day ago. I really started thinking about this. I was doing my daily work, all the research I do. I literally had just gone through these stories, headlines. Suspected CEO assassin scores win in court amid heightened security concerns. Feds uncover gaming chat room linked to Kirk assassination. TV anchor quits after network suspends her for honoring Kirk's memory on air. Singer loses 30,000 Instagram followers after comments on Charlie Kirk killing. And then there was this one that really took the cake. Assassination culture. Poll shows about half of liberals believe killing Trump, Musk, justified. And I was like, holy crap. It's kind of like, yeah, so happy Thursday, everyone. So I'm going through and I'm doing what I usually do, which is taking all that in, breaking it down, analyzing it, getting ready to, put it together for content purposes. And I'm like, wow, this is really messed up. Like all of it. So here's the thing. All of those stories have something in common other than being related to assassinations. It's the byproduct of a society that's turned its back on what matters most. So yeah, the assassin who walked right up to the CEO of United Health and killed him in cold blood in New York, he had his terrorism charge dropped. And yes, while that was happening, there were disturbingly throngs of his supporters, often dressed as Luigi, in the streets. I mean, how long ago would you have to go to find a time when the average American would be absolutely outraged if a CEO assassin were celebrated on the streets in this country? People dressing up to honor him. And they're like, oh, yeah. Yeah, look at those people. Oh, yeah, it's pretty good Luigi right there. That's where we are as a country? I mean, you start taking a look at that, and it's like, okay, well, the whole Kimmel thing begins to make more sense. I understand why there are people that thought they were fine. Beginning to understand why there are people that were celebrating Charlie Kirk's assassination. And yes, it became quite clear that discourse on Discord involving Charlie Kirk's assassin was extremely disturbing, raises additional questions about others in his group, including the assassin telling approximately 30 friends that he did it and that he was going to turn himself in. You know that none of them actually did? You know, as we found out, and we heard this very early on, that it was the assassin's parents who did it, identified him in the photos and the video released by the FBI, and then confronted their son and facilitated him turning himself in to authorities. But a long window of time evidently went by from the time that the assassin told somewhere in the neighborhood of 30-ish people that he had done it, and not one of them thought that, you know what, this is really bad. I should tell the authorities. What does that say? Regarding the local TV anchor in Illinois who was suspended for her 1-minute tribute to honor the life of Charlie Kirk. How long ago and where would you have to go to find a TV network suspending an anchor who paid tribute to, say, MLK? You go, hold on, you can't do that. There's no comparison between Charlie Kirk and MLK. Actually, more than you realize. Did you know that MLK Jr. happened to be the last non-office holder who was a political assassination for his political influence? That's how you have to go back to 68 and MLK Jr. to find the last time a non-office holder who held influence politically was assassinated in this country. And by the way, remember, MLK's message was extremely controversial in its day. And the story about the singer who lost tens of thousands of followers for posting a tribute to Charlie Kirk. Well, it happened to be Christian singer Forrest Frank. And what does it say when followers of a Christian artist flee the singer for honoring the life of one of the most effective Christian messengers of his time? And as for the chilling assassination culture story, it highlights multiple research pieces from over the past year from Rutgers, YouGov, NCRI, painting a really disturbing picture. Super disturbing. For example, Rutgers found that for Americans identifying left of center, under certain circumstances, up to 49% say, yeah, you know what? Assassinating Elon Musk could be justified at some level. 55% say, yeah, doing it in Trump, you could justify it. What? Oh, now we're into a whole different place. Where you take a look at two liberals that are next to you, and statistically, one of those two might be in a place where they could justify the assassination of Musk or Trump. What? No wonder all the celebrating online. And man, what does that say about this idea of an assassination culture? So I don't know about you, but that piece leaves me horrified. Pick up there next. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
When was the last time you bragged about your wireless company? Like, did you know my wireless company gave away 1,000 American flags to deserving vets and forgave $10 million in veteran debt? Did you know my wireless company raised almost $500,000 to help prevent veteran suicide? In other words, when your wireless company is Pure Talk, there's a whole lot to brag about. You can even brag about the coverage you get with Pure Talk, a 5G network that is insanely fast, dependable, and secure. And you can definitely brag about how much money you save with Pure Talk. Unlimited talk, text, plenty of data. Just $25 a month, saving the average family over $1,000 a year. It's time to switch to my favorite wireless company, Pure Talk. Go to puretalk.com/Levin and save an additional 50% off your first month. Again, puretalk.com/LEVIN. Make the switch today. Pure Talk. Wireless worth bragging about.
That is not a both sides problem. My friend is dead because of left-wing political radicalization. And if you want to cut that out, then be honest about it and look yourself in the mirror.
Speak truth, Vice President J.D. Vance. It is not a both sides problem. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. And I thought Mr. Producer is going to think I was crazy about the cat story. I figure he'd be one of the folks. Was not. Mentioned Sprite. So, yeah. By the way, talking about On Power, if you have not picked up a copy of On Power, you're not informed. You need to become more informed. So make sure you get yourself a copy of the book. By the way, if you are an animal lover, Rescuing Sprite, it's an oldie but a goodie. It was at back around 2007 or so. And so, yes, this audience in particular, Mark's love of animals and rescues in particular. And so I did think about that as I was coming out with my cat story. But anyway, talking about the assassination culture, some of the disturbing stuff we've all come across over the past week plus. It's not complicated. You do have a lot of these networks on the left, like, CNN or insert here. They want to talk rhetoric on both sides. What was it, the CBS morning show to Kevin McCarthy, like the next day? The rhetoric on both sides, and Trump in particular. Oh, my God. The people who want to go to Trump, you're talking about a man who was literally shot last year. And there's the other time, the person's literally on trial right now over the second assassination attempt last year. And you want to talk about the president's rhetoric. Oh my gosh, these people. He was shot, but his rhetoric. Go fly a freaking kite. To the rhetoric on both sides people. But aside from the absurdity of the conversation, it's all based on a false premise. The problem, it's not rhetoric from any side of the political aisle. You don't become that inherently broken inside simply due to rhetoric, political rhetoric. It's not the premise of the problem. Not the premise of the problem. For effectively half of Democrats in this country to evidently believe that assassinations of people they don't agree with politically can be justified, there's something much more that's going on inside. Pick up there and take some of your calls next. I'm Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin.
When was the last time you bragged about your wireless company? Like, did you know my wireless company gave away 1,000 American flags to deserving vets and forgave $10 million in veteran debt? Did you know my wireless company raised almost $500,000 to help prevent veteran suicide? In other words, when your wireless company is Pure Talk, there's a whole lot to brag about. You can even brag about the coverage you get with Pure Talk, a 5G network that is insanely fast, dependable, and secure. And you can definitely brag about how much money you save with Pure Talk. Unlimited talk, text, plenty of data. Just $25 a month, saving the average family over $1,000 a year. It's time to switch to my favorite wireless company, Pure Talk. Go to puretalk.com/Levin and save an additional 50% off your first month. Again, puretalk.com/LEVIN. Make the switch today. Pure Talk. Wireless worth bragging about.
Mark Levin, America's Tyranny Hunter. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
The First Amendment protects a lot of very ugly speech, but if you celebrate Charlie Kirk's death, you should not be protected from being fired for being a disgusting person.
The vice president with Jesse Waters last night. Fox News was on fire, had a lot of great material, and the man is exactly right. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin, and we're talking about a lot of things that have been broken here. Spiritual journey and an assassination culture. And I talked a little bit about some of the eye-opening stuff and self-awareness for me that's come about over the last little bit, digesting everything that's been going on, including the loss of my little Maine Coon Piper, and kind of putting things in perspective, but also the eye-opening reality that we now live in. A world where researchers have found that effectively half of those that identify on the political left, under certain circumstances, like, yeah, assassinating Musk or Trump, yeah, it's cool. Could be justified. It's actually worse, much worse than I realized, I guess, is what that is for me. So, it doesn't matter who you are, by the way. If you happen to be on the right and you're like, yeah, they're assassinations of people I don't like, that'd be fine. I could see the justification that if that's you, you're broken inside. It just happened. By the way, they studied that. They're just not that many people on the right who feel that way. So it's not complicated. I talked about the premise of this being false. The idea that it's a left to right thing, that it's political rhetoric, that I get so tired about the rhetoric, because you don't go from rhetoric to, yeah, you know what, I think whacking people, I think assassinations are fine. It's what happens when you remove God from the equation. When you remove God from the equation, evil fills the gap. Period. And as our society, and especially the left, just continues to make up their own rules, continues to deny the Judeo-Christian values that this country was founded on, just go against what God stood for every step of the way, what's going to take the place? What's going to take the place? So here we are, just over a week removed from the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and the headlines are just as horrific today as they were on that day, just in slightly modified ways. I mean, because if it were one person who had done what they did to Charlie, that is an American tragedy. But then when you find out, oh, look at how many people are on board with this. And as we've seen with the celebrations and everything else, holy crap. And the Kimmel crap. And so, my thought in all this is, what is it that Charlie would want for you to do? For that matter, what is it that God would want for you to do? It's time for our country to turn back to faith. That's how you fix this thing. Is not tone down the political rhetoric. That's not the issue here. People have gotten so far away from what actually matters. Turn back to faith. It's the only way this thing is ever going to change for the better. Let's go to SJB in Richmond, Virginia. Been patiently waiting on the line. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's going on, Brian? How are you doing? I don't know, but Mark Levin always picks some great special guests to fill in for him.
Blessed to be on that roster. Thank you.
Yes, man. I was thinking about what's going on right now in our society with our talk show hosts or these late shows. Back when Johnny Carson and Jay Leno and David Letterman, those guys were funny And they picked on not just one side. They didn't take sides. You almost didn't know who they were for politically because they didn't make it part of their show. But what happened with guys like Jimmy Kimmel and Conan O'Brien, not Conan, well, I haven't followed him in a while, but guys like Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert, it kind of all started with Jon Stewart on Comedy Central. And when he was he came in as a newscaster, and he did political things that were comedy at that time. He was funny in the beginning. Stephen Colbert was literally funny.
He was, yeah.
You know what happened? What happened? It seemed like everybody started imitating that show, the Daily Show, and it became part of all the other late night shows where they were doing what the Daily Show started when it was really funny. But to me, what Jimmy Kimmel did in his last stance before he was, well, I wouldn't say canceled, but either way, before he was fired, I believe he's kind of opened up a door for all the rest of the late night folk that if they decide they want to, they're making 7 digits, right? They're not, if they do get fired, like Jimmy, he's not going to hurt for a while as the average guy that gets fired from a job that works check to check. I mean, if you're making the kind of money these guys are making, you get fired.
That's not even, you're not only correct with that, they would not have to work again. I'm sure they would be fine unless they've just, completely engaged in financial mismanagement. But beyond that, what always happens on the woke left, and this will happen with Colbert too, it'll happen with Kimmel if he is not brought back. They'll go get some massive deals. I mean, it'll be, one of the streaming networks that will pick them up. It could be a Netflix or what have you that would, somebody on the left is going to give them a ton of money to go do something that way. And so the sad reality, just in terms of the marketplace, is that it's been corrupted to such a degree because they've been losing money, right? We find out, you have Colbert who's losing, $40-50 million a year, and they were tolerating that. I mean, it's an outrageous thing. It shows you the extent to which some of these networks will go to put out their political messaging, guised as comedy or whatever else. But because you have people on the left who are willing to lose that kind of money to put out their desired political messaging, you're going to find other outlets that will probably end up doing the same thing. And they might even come out making more money in the end. So, I mean, that is the kind of the other end of this thing is you're right. They are certainly not going to be hurting. I did want to ask you, I understand that you used to be a Democrat.
Please. Listen, when you start hearing what they're pushing, and I'm not, I got to be discreet, because people will turn against you. I mean, family members and all kind of things. People lose family members because of their politics. But what a guy like Jimmy Kimmel has done, he's opened the door for any other comedian decides they want to go ahead and check out and go to Hawaii for 2 or 3 months. All they got to do is just pick a right time and say the wrong thing. And guess what? There'll be Jimmy Kimmel, too.
I appreciate you being there. God bless, my friend. Let's go to Robert, who is in Wisconsin. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm sorry about your wife.
So it was actually my cat. My cat. Oh, now, and so if I did put on that it was something about my wife, she was worried about that. She said, you made it sound like I might have died. She said, I'm here. I promise you. So no, it would have been much worse if it were my wife, but it was my cat. But thank you very much.
Okay. Why are we spreading hate on Levin's radio program here? I mean, Schumer had no audience, and he said that what we're doing is we're trying to take away the free speech. And it's actually them taking away the free speech. And I just don't get why you would put something like that on the air knowing that he's on the opposite side.
So, like knowing what's going on out there with Schumer. So what you had was the proposal today. They are making a big deal of this. Democrats are. We're for free speech. And you're going to see this played up a lot by their allies in the news media, what they call the Nope act, as they are trying to say that the Trump administration is operating in censorship and everything. I mean, it's the ultimate in projecting. So everything that the left has done, going back to the Obama administration, using government agencies for targeting purposes, trying to silence conservative organizations, trying to silence those that are trying to disseminate information online, trying to shut down the finances of conservative organizations, in some cases, conservative individuals, too. So that is all going on right now. And so, I think it's instructive that you're aware, and that's why I played the clip from Schumer. Let's go to Carrie in North Carolina. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian. My husband and I just wanted to send our sympathies for your cat, Piper.
Thank you.
Know the pain. We had 2 labs that recently passed. They were both rescues, and we have an Icelandic sheepdog. She was also a rescue. And to bring you some comfort, there's a book. It's called Cold Noses at the Pearly Gates, and it's by the author is Gary Kurtz, I think Kurz. It's a wonderful little book, and when my shepherd Doberman had passed, my parents gave me this book. It's very biblical, and it teaches us that we will see our pets again. So I hope that will bring you some comfort. And speaking of comfort, the poor wife, I can't understand how people can be so cruel. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Where has
you're talking about Erica Kirk?
Yes, and those little children and his parents and all of his friends. It just, man's allowed to speak, and he didn't hurt anybody. These people are nuts.
They are. You have my condolences as well. Thank you for the kind words, and also the book recommendation as well. And actually, what you said is something that my wife was telling me as well. About me trying to get better regarding matters of faith myself. That is something that she had firmly believed in. That maybe I had been a bit more skeptical of, but now I'm becoming a believer. So thank you for being there, and good call. But yeah, the situation with Erica, the kids, and then you think about, to her point, the Kimmel situation. And here is somebody who is a father, right? We heard a lot about the situation with his kid, how emotional he became over complications and disability. So here he is, somebody who you would think in theory would understand what it's like to be a parent, would understand the gravity of a 31-year-old father not being there for his 2 young children, let alone his wife. And then how he can carry out the messaging that he carried out. Again, it gets back to what I was talking about, what's broken inside and what has to be wrong with somebody that is willing to travel down that very dark place. Also just shows what a poser that guy really is, too. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
When was the last time you bragged about your wireless company? Like, did you know my wireless company gave away 1,000 American flags to deserving vets and forgave $10 million in veteran debt? Did you know my wireless company raised almost $500,000 to help prevent veteran suicide? In other words, when your wireless company is Pure Talk, there's a whole lot to brag about. You can even brag about the coverage you get with Pure Talk, a 5G network that is insanely fast, dependable, and secure. And you can definitely brag about how much money you save with Pure Talk. Unlimited talk, text, plenty of data. Just $25 a month, saving the average family over $1,000 a year. It's time to switch to my favorite wireless company, Pure Talk. Go to puretalk.com/Levin and save an additional 50% off your first month. Again, puretalk.com/LEVIN. Make the switch today. Pure Talk, wireless worth bragging about.
Unfortunately, some, from the dark corners of the internet all the way to the Oval Office, want to cherry pick which instances of political violence they want to condemn. Listen, doing that only further divides us, and it makes it harder to heal.
What in the world are you talking about, man? Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. So a little thing about this, when they're cherry picking which instances of political violence. Okay, so let me run this one by you real quick. We have had 7 total attempts, 6 events that were assassinations over the past 2.5 years. Of those 7 instances, 6 were on the left, 1 on the right, 1 involving Minnesota's former House Speaker, Melissa Hortman, her husband, and her dog. Horrific situation. I don't recall anybody on the right saying, yeah, it's great, or celebrating it. You see any celebration? What did the president have to say about that? Was he like, yeah, cherry picking which instances of political violence? This is not a both sides kind of thing. This hasn't been a both sides kind of problem. And these people, they're so far, I guess they just count on their constituencies to be so stupid that they could actually blame Donald Trump in the name of political violence, someone who was shot last year and had a second assassination attempt on him. They blame him. It's unconscionable, these people. And speaking of which, I had referenced research, a study that had been conducted by the Network Contagion Research Institute, Rutgers University's Social Perception Lab, about political violence, about assassinations and the tolerance for it. And ultimately, they got about half of folks on the left. They're like, yeah, you know what? I could see a circumstance where assassinating Musk or Trump is okay. So let me just break that down a little bit more for you. So what they did in the study, they took a look at individuals that identified as far left, liberal, or slightly liberal. By the way, they did this on the right as well. There just wasn't much of it to be found. But the far left, liberal, slightly liberal, and then they focused on the views justifying assassinations. To give you an idea of how deeply disturbing the situation is on the political left, 13% view a potential Trump assassination as completely justified. 9% say the same for Musk. Just unconditional, yeah. Then you get 28% of the political left who see a potential Trump assassination as it could be somewhat justified. 20% about Musk. And then by the time you add in the qualifiers, there are certain situations where like, yeah, 55% will get to take out Trump and 48 Musk. Nothing to see there, right? Be right back.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
I would not be the Vice President of the United States were it not for Charlie Kirk. Aside from Donald Trump, I can't think of a single person who deserves more credit.
Of course, your Vice President, J.D. Vance, strong statement there. Strong statement. Oh, by the way, it is what's out there with this Kimmel stuff is just hilarious. So you had the Eric Swalwell in Congress today with his Jimmy Kimmel Live hat on. And somebody actually sent me, I guess there are a bunch of memes that are going around with Kimmel. And I actually thought they were jokes. You have people that are apparently like putting out, I stand with Jimmy Kimmel. And I am Jimmy Kimmel. Like, what? I thought they were parodies. I thought, like, no, these people are serious. I stand with Jimmy Kimmel. Oh my gosh, that is part of the problem. That is so part of the problem. Do you realize what you stand with at that point? It's not a very happy thing to be standing in. All right, Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. Mark is in Israel. We'll be back in the not so distant, and I'll be locked and loaded for you again. I host the Brian Mudd Show, home station WJNO in West Palm Beach, and you can catch me socially at Brian Mudd Radio. Also, the Brian Mudd Show podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And I have had a lot of stuff up till now that has been all part of the heavy news cycle. A lot of it that has been kind of chilling when we take a look at the research and the assassination culture out there. I did want to talk about the brighter side here for a minute, because there is a lot of good news actually out there. You know, good news never prints as much as the negative stuff. And the negative stuff, when you effectively have half of the left that under certain conditions are like, yeah, I could see where assassinating Trump and Musk, that seems about right. I mean, that is a deeply disturbing place to be in for this country when you got effectively half of the country is like, yeah. Oh, boy. So the Charlie Kirk effect, as we take a look at the brighter side of things here. You know, in the grand scheme of this news cycle, you see what the positives are. You've seen so much of what's been happening at Turning Point all throughout the course of this week. I mean, the tributes there, unbelievable. You've no doubt heard about the tens of thousands of requests for new chapters for Turning Point USA that have come in. By the way, totaling close to 60,000 new chapter requests most recently. That's in addition to hundreds of thousands of volunteer requests that have come pouring in. By way of comparison, you take a look at what Turning Point as an organization was preceding Kirk's assassination. Super impressive, right? Super influential, right? I mean, as J.D. Vance said in that clip, next to Trump, nobody did more to get him elected as vice president than Charlie Kirk and Turning Point. And yet, Turning Point USA, at the time of Charlie's assassination, had a total of 2,100 chapters, fewer than 500 employees. Again, you're talking about just the request. And they're obviously not all going to translate into new chapters, but just the intent, close to 60,000, hundreds of thousands of volunteer requests. I mean, that's massive. There is no doubt going to be explosive growth at Turning Point because of this incredible interest. And so it leaves little doubt that Turning Point will soon have a far larger presence, a far greater influence than ever before. Earlier today, Erica Kirk was unanimously named by the board of Turning Point the new CEO. So she is officially at the reins. I mean, her speech last Friday, one of the most incredible messages, one of the most incredible presentations that I have ever seen. She's going to be an unbelievable force. And with all of this support, holy cow. So stand by. But also importantly, one of the, I was talking about last hour, the spiritual part of all this and the brokenness has nothing to do with rhetoric, because left-right rhetoric, I think about this. You take a look all throughout our country's history. I mean, the founding fathers were fighting with each other endlessly. They weren't all on the same page about things. Very difficult political discourse has been part of everything. We used to have fights in Congress. We had, speaking of assassinations, you had members of Congress. There have been 12 members of Congress that have been assassinated. Most of them, in the early years of our country's history. There ended up being a rule that you can no longer take guns into the Capitol because, stuff happened. And so it's nothing new. It's very easy to get wrapped into recency bias when it comes to, political rhetoric and, things are worse than they've been. I always point to the Civil War. No matter how bad you think things are left to right in this country, I mean, we literally fought a war against ourselves in this country. So they've been much worse, I assure you. But I will say that I'm not seeing anything so deeply disturbing in modern American history as what I'm seeing, where you have this assassination culture that is pervasive on the left. And the only way you're going to fix something when you have somebody that believes that an assassination of somebody they don't like politically is an acceptable thing, only way you're going to fix that is by fixing what's broken inside of that person. And the only way that's going to happen is if they turn back to faith, turn back to God. And that ultimately was Charlie's biggest thing, right? He said himself, if he wanted to be remembered as one thing, that's what he wanted to be remembered for, is his faith, his Christian faith. So about that, we are seeing the surge not just with Turning Point, but we're seeing the surge in pews too. So here we are. We've got a full week worth of information. We're a full week past the assassination. And churches across the country continuing to see increased attendance, especially from young adults and teens. The Catholic News Agency specifically reporting 15% increases. 15% increases. Okay, so what does that look like? Now, to put it in perspective, when do you think it was? How far back do you have to go? What would be the most recent event that would be comparable, that would lead somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, 15% more people to church? Well, that would be post 9/11, when the Pew Research Center measured church attendance rising by an average of 16%. 16%. Again, we're getting reports here coming out the first week at 15. So I think this comparison helps add some additional context to the Charlie Kirk effect in this regard. I mean, across this country, but also, for that matter, around the world. And so when you think about this having the impact on people from a point of faith that is analogous to 9/11, I mean, that shows you the gravity of the situation. It's big time. And so, yeah, with the notable surge being with commonly the youngest demographics, young adults and teens, there's a lot there that you can feel good about. In a new study, this was interesting. It was released just days before Kirk's assassination. This study from the Barna Group came out on September 3rd. So it's just over 2 weeks ago, this thing came out. Their State of the Church initiative dropped. And they had a bombshell that Gen Z and millennials are now the most regular churchgoers in the country. Again, preceding the assassination, Gen Z and millennials. And so flipping the script on the whole idea that, hey, it's always, you're the parents that are more likely to be going to church. Well, here's the deal. Gen Zers in the study were found going to church an average of 1.9 times per month. Millennials, 1.8. That is about double for both of those generations where it was 5 years ago. Double. And Gen X hanging in there, same as Gen X has been, at an average of 1.6 visits per month. And then you get into boomers and elders, the least likely to attend, an average of 1.4 visits. I mean, for most people, it's probably exactly the opposite of what you would think. Now, literally, the younger you go, the more likely they are to seek a closer connection to their faith. That's really interesting. The shift is real. So younger folks already showing a renewed interest in faith. And by the way, in the study, they found that churches that lean into relationships, especially with digital tools like social media, it's where the biggest gains are coming in. But it's the first time in American history the younger generations are the most interested in connecting with their faith, and far more than older generations. And again, that was prior to the Charlie Kirk effect. Now, he may very well have influenced this heavily, his work through Turning Point, but that is prior to the assassination. And then you take a look at, and oh, by the way, we're getting like 9/11 style increases, and the biggest increases are coming with the younger generations. And that really begins to paint a picture, doesn't it? And on a personal note, I've received notes to this effect from listeners that have told me they're reconnecting with their faith. You know, I've had folks that have told me, hey, you know, I'm seeking out a church for the first time. And so I see this even anecdotally. And so, yeah, Gen Z and millennials now the most regular churchgoers in the U.S. It's a pretty remarkable thing. I'll pick up there next. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
I really do hope that the person who murdered Charlie Kirk eventually accepts that what he did was evil and terrible, but we still got to have justice anyway.
Yeah, once again, Vice President J.D. Vance. And as we take a look at what we're seeing in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the Charlie Kirk effect, it's real. It's real. And the time for this is ripe. Now, if you're just joining us, pretty remarkable thing that Gen Z and millennials are now the most regular churchgoers in the U.S. And by the way, that was actually before the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And then we've seen another big surge in church going by the youngest generation in particular. And so you start to put this together. It's like, all right, well, this is definitely something that Charlie would want to see. So here's the next piece of this. Not only good for their souls, you might say, but also for society. So it should come as no surprise. But studies consistently show that there is a correlation between regular church attendance and lower rates of violent crime. Not saying that there aren't people that won't, kneel at a pew and then walk out and do something really awful, but they're a lot less likely to. So, for example, a study in social science research found that individuals who frequently attend religious services are far less likely to engage in criminal behavior, especially violent acts. 20 to 30% lower likelihood of committing any crimes, and a little bit higher when it comes to violent acts. So you want to knock down crime by 20 to 30%? Yeah, get people to connect with faith. Get people in church. As was stated in the Journal of Research in Crime and Delinquency, quote, religious involvement fosters social bonds and moral frameworks that deter criminality. Okay, makes sense. And for years, I've shared, including on this show, guesting for the great one, the connection to faith and mental health outcomes based on Harvard's groundbreaking research. This came in 2018. This showed that by the age of 20, those who are raised with religious practices were on average 18% happier, 30% more likely to help others, 33% less likely to engage in substance abuse, among a whole host of other things. And what was more in the Harvard study is that those who fared best were those who prayed daily. In other words, having faith in one's life in any capacity, being raised in that kind of environment, and with that being part of the picture, provided benefit. And then the more involved with one's faith was, the greater the benefit. I mean, it stands to reason, right? Especially if you're a person of faith, this most sensible thing in the world you've heard. So no real surprise, but then you start taking a look at what's happening here. You start taking a look at the Charlie Kirk effect, and you begin to see the real positives in this thing. Because, okay, so we have this surge in attendance that is analogous, what we've seen so far that's been measured, to what we saw after 9/11. But we're also seeing it in the youngest generations of adults. We were seeing that before the assassination. Boy, that is especially encouraging for the future of our country. And you begin to take a look at what might be happening with those that maybe haven't dented the doors of a church yet. But if you've seen that kind of surge in interest in going to church, how many people are taking a look at, hey, what is this all about in the first place? You got to imagine that has been growing too. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin.
Mark Levin, America's passionately cerebral voice. Talk with that voice now. 877-381-3811.
It's repulsive that the Trump administration is perversely using this awful death as a predicate to supercharge their long-standing campaign against political opponents. How low can they go?
Oh my gosh. First of all, he's nowhere near as good of an actor as Sparty is, as Cory Booker, a New Jersey senator, that being Chuck Schumer. But I mean, the faked outrage there, it's just, it is hilarious. Oh my gosh. Talk about, he goes in the bucket to where he's not believable as a person on this planet. It is just, it is so laughable, that guy, as they are pretending to be the free speech crusaders now. They're so horrified by Kimmel getting axed by companies that were making corporate decisions. And the projecting. It is the people who brought you cancel culture, the people who weaponized federal government agencies, the people that tried to silence you, that tried to put you out of a job, all these. Oh my gosh, no conscience, those people. Talk about some people that need to dent the door of a church. Now, Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. Great one in Israel. He will be back in the near future. And in the meantime, you can brush up on your reading with On Power. If you don't have a copy yet, shame on you. You can correct that right now by going to your favorite bookstore, going to Amazon, whatever, just On Power. Go ahead and get your copy and become more informed. That way, when Mark gets back, you're ready to go. Now, as we take a look at, kind of the context, I was going through the Charlie Kirk effect and some of the real positives, and even how, what we have seen here is analogous from a church-going standpoint to what we saw after 9/11. Pretty remarkable thing. Some historical perspective for you. When you take a look at the history of political assassinations in this country, in our country's 249-plus year history, if we take a breakout of political assassinations that have taken place, starting with the federal level, we have had 4 presidents that have been assassinated in American history. We have had 4 federal judges that have been assassinated. There have been 8 diplomats assassinated. And you have had 12 members of Congress that have been assassinated. Then you take a look at the state level. At the state level, in our country's history. 4 governors have been assassinated, 2 state judges, 3 cabinet officials, and 25 state legislators. And then all the way down to the local level, you have had 16 officials in various capacities within local governments that have been assassinated. Okay, so you got all those numbers there, right? Well, just overview. You don't need to hang on to it. I'm just going to come back to one. Now, how many non-office holders, influential non-office holders, were assassinated for political reasons? You know the number? That is 4. The same as the number of presidents that have been assassinated, or federal judges, or governors. And so it really shows you how rare by comparison it has been. And kind of the overall impact on this country those can have. And so if you take a look at the company that Charlie Kirk keeps in this regard, you go back to June of 1963. These are the other 3. You had Medgar Evers, civil rights activist who was murdered by a white supremacist. Next up, February in 1965, in Malcolm X, a black nationalist leader murdered by members of the Nation of Islam. Next up, April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr., of course, civil rights leader, murdered by segregationists. Which also shows you something about the 60s in particular. There are a lot of similarities. The assassination culture of the 60s and what we have seen here over the past 2.5 years. So Charlie Kirk, faith-based conservative activist, joins that company. And if I'm looking at this thing from an optimistic perspective, I mean, how horrible the 60s were with all the assassinations that took place. I just mentioned the non-office holders. Of course, then you start getting into the office holders like, Kennedy, both Kennedys, sitting president, sitting senator who was a presidential candidate, among others. And it was a horrible window of time. But the country was able to move beyond it. And for a long time, we distanced ourselves from that type of thing. And so, here's to hoping, you might say praying, that we're able to do a similar thing. Now, in the social media age, boy, that's a much more difficult putt. But, perspective in these things can be key. All right, let's go to David. David in Michigan, welcome to the show.
Hello, Brian. Good to be with you.
Appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. I was thinking about, of course, I've followed Charlie for years and so forth, and I was thinking about the upcoming funeral. And I just thought to myself, what was the last funeral for somebody that was big? And to me, it was Princess Diana. And she was a humanitarian. She worked on the landmines and many things. And so anyway, I thought about how the U.S. media and then the BBC Worldwide and other networks, how they covered the funeral. And, and it came to mind prior to me calling tonight that it was about 3 hours of what I was thinking was live coverage. But in the meantime, while I've been waiting, I just searched it on Grok, and it ends up that ABC and NBC had 3 to 4 hours. Oh, sorry, ABC and CBS had 3 to 4 hours of live coverage and more coverage besides that. And NBC had 4 to 5 hours coverage. And I thought, okay, now an impact on the world, Charlie by far has far more impact on not just the United States, but his messaging and everything else that goes along with the incredible attributes that he had, carry far more importance to the world than Princess Diana. So my thought was, how much coverage will those same legacy media groups give to Charlie Kirk's funeral? And are they going to use their primetime network anchors that are going to be on the site, just like in London? And I'm hopeful, but, anyway.
It's a good point. It's a good point, and I think, the historical comparison and often the interest, you want to talk about the English influence. Think about the Queen. I mean, those networks, in their morning show certainly went wall to wall for Queen Elizabeth as well. And, we'll see what they do end up doing for Charlie Kirk. By the way, related to that, on Sunday, I've been honored with the opportunity to anchor radio coverage. So across many of the radio stations that the Great One is on, if you happen to tune in on Sunday from 2 to 5 Eastern or 11 to 2 Pacific, then you'll hear the coverage. That will be a difficult one. I got to be honest. It's I've covered a lot of things, a lot of events. Just the emotions going into it. It's a lot for me to digest, and something I'll be spending the next couple of days kind of get myself mentally in a position to be able to do. Let's go to Joe. Joe in Texas, welcome to the show.
Honor and privilege, Brian. Thanks for filling in, and safe journey, Mark. Safe journey home. Brian, amen. I had a question for you and a comment after it. Why did I don't know if it was a conversation direct or if it was a text, state his transgender partner, I'll be polite, what was he sorry for? He was sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I in theory that, now I'm going to go and, I'm going away. And I suppose that is ultimately the thing. And that also in theory that the assassin did not want to drag the partner into it, which, by the way, in the grand scheme of things, and I referenced this earlier in the show, one of the more deeply disturbing elements of this, as it has been presented to us now, I'm not saying that, when we get more information, there aren't some of the dynamics here that could shift a little. But if we take the information as it's been presented to us at this point, there are a matter of hours that went by, somewhat unclear how many, but a matter of hours that went by from the time that communication was taking place with the assassin telling his transgendered partner that also apparently is a furry, and telling the group of miscreants in this Discord group, the gamer group, that he did it, and none of them did anything. Not one of them. Ultimately came down to the parents having to identify him and confronting him and facilitating his surrender, at which point it seems that is when he went and ended up sending these messages out. So there is a lot there about these other people that are involved, including the level of cooperation. You end up hearing that the partner was very cooperative. Yeah, after the fact. Certainly didn't raise a hand and go, oh my gosh, this is really bad. I think I should get in touch with authorities. Not that we have been presented any information on. Appreciate you being there. Also in Texas, we'll move over to Houston. We've got Gerald. Welcome to the show.
Yes, Brian, I think you're right on point, with the spiritual side of this. One thing that I have been thinking about for several years is how persecution's been growing in the West. I'm talking about persecution against Christians and Jews. And I recall back in 2019 when the Cathedral Notre Dame was burned in Paris, I was listening to a police inspector and stated that they didn't consider the Notre Dame incident vandalism, but there had been he said, I'm quoting him directly, 3,000 incidents of church and synagogue vandalism in France in that year. And so to the point, what I'm getting to here is that the Judeo-Christian value system, they don't want it. The left, they can't accept it. They cannot live with it. And, that's where the persecution's coming from. And I think it's just when the government, like the Supreme Court, came down with this decision about homosexuality, and they're getting into morals at that point. They're not getting into natural law. They're actually getting into morals. So now it's like, well, the government endorses it. The only institution that's against it is the church. So, if you look at these mass shootings that's been going on in these Christian schools, they're all homosexual young people.
Gerald, I appreciate the call. First of all, you're exactly right on the vandalism of churches, especially in Europe. I remember doing a great deal of research around the burning of Notre Dame to, kind of provide some context to it until we ended up getting some eventual reasons. But even then, the vandalism, very real, has been for some time. Your point about the compatibility of Marxism, of leftists, with religion, with Judeo-Christian values that this country was founded on, they're not compatible, right? I mean, there's nothing compatible about, hey, I'm feeling froggy today. I think I'll identify as the plus in the homosexual alphabet, right? There's nothing that is compatible about the homosexual alphabet and Judeo-Christian values. So at the point where you embrace transgenderism, at the point where we have pride, the lowest form of the human condition, by the way, is having pride in one's sexuality. I mean, truly. But we have pride, which, I mean, also what biblically is said about that. And so none of these things are compatible. And that's just one example on the sexuality side. And to speak nothing of, like, hey, abortion on demand and what values say about that, what faith says about that. So, yeah, that's where you just divorce yourself from it altogether, right? They're not compatible. So we're just going to toss it out. And you see what happens in society and where we are as a result. And so, it's encouraging that we're seeing the youngest generation be the most likely to turn back to their faith. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
Just last week, a great American, Charlie Kirk, was heinously assassinated for speaking his mind. He was a great young man, incredible future. Some people said he might be president someday. I told him, I said, Charlie, I think you have a good shot someday at being president. And he just wanted to take care of youth. He loved youth. I've never seen anybody relate to youth like Charlie, and they related to him, and they're devastated. But I appreciate the many British citizens who have offered their condolences. And again, Charlie was a great person. We'll be going out to a service on Sunday. I'll be leaving with some of the people in this room just to celebrate Charlie and all that he's done. So incredible. Never seen anything like it.
Yeah, so that was the president while in England today. And what you've seen with the outpouring of support for Turning Point, Charlie Kirk, a return to church even, it's been a worldwide phenomenon. And so, yeah, there's a lot of negativity out there. Yeah, a lot of freaky people that have celebrated this thing. Pretty concerning. A lot of dark information I shared with you about the number of people who are okay with political assassinations on the left. They don't like Trump. I don't like Musk. Yeah, I could see where that would be okay. That is not good. But there is a lot of positivity that is coming out of this thing. And as a lot of people have said, perhaps that was the turning point, what happened with Charlie. And, do our best to make it a better day. God bless you. Appreciate you being here. Always an honor. Brian Mudd in for the great one, Mark Levin.